All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this virtual whiteboard, if you want to call it like that. So, we are dealing with the topic of problems of the modern world. Now, this topic would be ideal to deal with in class, but unfortunately, I don't have you in front of me, so I can't really bounce any ideas off of you in real time. So, unfortunately, this is what we have to resort to. Now, before we start, I would just like to say that I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're keeping sane in this strange time, to say the least. And I hope that we can get through this together as successfully as possible. And actually, I'm sure that we will get through this together. Now, let's go back to the depressing topic of problems of the modern world. That was my pep talk. So yesterday you were given a mind map that I asked you to complete, fill in. It was the title, so the main title was Problems of the Modern World, and then it was divided into four categories. So political problems, social problems, financial problems, and environmental problems. Um, and at this point, I'd just like to say that financial, social, and political problems are extremely intertwined. So these three really are very, very connected. So at some point, it would really not make sense to divide them. However, that is sort of the division that the problems are usually divided into. So I decided to still have it this way, as I think it's then easier to go through all of them. Even environmental problems have a huge impact on all the other ones. So the world is connected, everything is connected. Um, Bad things happen to one person somewhere, and it could affect someone in a completely different place. So everything is connected. Now let's start, shall we? So I'll go through the mind map. Quick warning here: I will share the mind map with you, but I cannot promise that it will be available forever, right? Because I only get 3 free mind maps on this website. So if I need to make another mind map, I will have to delete one, and this one will eventually get deleted. So I would suggest that you write this down in your notebooks, or at the very least, like take a screenshot or something. All right. Um, so let's start. We're going to start with environmental problems. Now, this is not a new topic for you, I should hope. So let's see. So I've divided environmental problems into, let's put it like that, into natural disasters, animals, pollution, and global warming. All right, so let's take a look at natural disasters first. So, natural disasters are usually divided into geological disasters, hydrological disasters, meteorological disasters, and then wildfires as a separate category. Now, geological disasters, something to do with the ground, right? Geo, the ground. So, here we have avalanches, plazovi, landslides, or perhaps mudslides here. So, when land slides down a steep hill, sinkhole, so when a hole just suddenly appears on the ground, on the ground. And then we have volcanic eruptions and, of course, earthquakes. So these are all natural disasters connected with the ground. And then we have hydrological disasters. So hydro meaning something to do with water, right? So here we have floods, and keep in mind that another word for a sort of very intense, quick flood would be called a flash flood or a deluge. And then we also have tsunamis, which, of course, as we know, are caused by earthquakes. So connected. Third one, meteorological disaster. So connected with the weather. So here we have blizzards, tornadoes, cyclones, and remember from last year, another word for a cyclone could be a hurricane or a typhoon, depending on where on Earth it happens. Then we also have drought, so the opposite of a flood. And then last one, we have wildfires, so fires that tend to happen naturally when the temperatures are really high and everything else is really dry. Two important ones from sort of that happened recently are the ones in Australia, and before that they had them in California. Okay, now let's take a look at the next one. So next one was animals. let's see what we have here. So extinction. So extinct animals, animals that no longer live, that none of the species, no member of the species has survived, are called extinct animals. So, for example, dinosaurs or the dodo. Animals that are still around, but they're sort of slowly dying out, are endangered. So endangered animals. At this point, I would just like to recommend the Netflix documentary The Tiger King. It's about tigers and lots of other things as well. It's a whole mess, but it's a really good documentary. I recommend it. Um, Next, we have poachers, so people who kill animals, hunt animals illegally, right? And trophy hunters are also connected with poachers. So trophy hunters, mainly people who hunt animals just to put their heads on their walls. Last one that we have here is loss of habitat. So the reason why certain animals are going extinct is because we are cutting down their habitats. This usually means forests, and the word to use here would be deforestation. Okay. And yeah, I think that's it. Let's move on to the next one. So here we have pollution. So we have pollution of air, pollution of water, and then landfills, right? So pollution of the ground, and all our trash gathers in landfills. Um, However, nowadays we are trying to move away from landfills and build recycling centers, in which we can recycle our trash and reuse it, right? Um, that's the end goal. Okay. And the last one here is global warming. Now, you've heard a lot about global warming, so let's take a look at which words are connected with global warming. So, ice caps melting. Of course, as the temperatures rise, ice caps melt and sea level rises. This is especially problematic for people who live in cities that are near the coast. One of the reasons our globe is warming up is because we are burning a lot of fossil fuels. What are fossil fuels? Oil, coal, premok, and natural gases. So burning fossil fuels generates greenhouse gases, so toplogredni plini, which are water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and ozone. Right? So these gases, into larger quantities, would contribute largely to global warming. And the one here that we haven't mentioned is also ozone depletion. So the layer of ozone that is sort of between us and the sun that we need. For a while, it was getting thinner and thinner, but I believe now it is sort of not that big of a problem anymore, which is good. Okay, so these were environmental problems. Good. And now let's move on to financial problems. Let's see what we have here. Okay, the first one here is inflation. Now, what does inflation mean? To give you an example, so let's say today your parents give you 10 euro per week for you to buy, I don't know, Mars bars. Okay, so for 10 euro, you are able to get 10 Mars bars. It's great. But then a few months later, you go to the store, you have your 10 euros, you want to buy your 10 Mars bars, but then you see that the Mars bars are no longer 1 euro a piece, but they are, let's say, 1 euro and a half per piece, which means you can no longer buy 10 Mars bars, but you can only buy like 6, right? And that is inflation. It's basically money losing its value. It's a problem. Next, we have poverty. Poverty, obviously, an issue. So, reuščina, student debt, and this word again, debt without the B. Student debt is not a huge issue in Slovenia. However, if you want to go study somewhere else where you have to pay for going for visiting university, then that would be a huge problem. America, United States of America, is a very good example of that, where students have to pay well into their, middle age to make sure that their debt is paid off. Then we have housing crisis. So houses are too expensive. People cannot afford them, which leads to homelessness. And of course, connected to that are the homeless. Next, healthcare costs. Obviously, if you have a very rare disease that, for example, uh, you can't treat it here, then healthcare costs would skyrocket. For sort of normal diseases, that's not a huge problem in Slovenia because your insurance would cover it. But for example, in certain countries like the United States, again, uh, people a lot of the time people go in debt and go bankrupt because they cannot afford to cover their healthcare costs. Unemployment, especially nowadays with the coronavirus and so on, is a lot of people are getting unemployed. But in otherwise, job automation is also very much connected to unemployment. So people losing their job because job automation. Next one here we have stock market crash. So stock market means borza. And when a stock market crashes, it means that all the stocks, so delnice, drop in price, which then influence everything, right? This influences everything. I don't fully understand how the stock market works, so I'm going to stop my explanation here, but it is something that is considered to be a problem. Lastly, here, low minimum wage. So basically, in Slovenia, you are your employer is not allowed to pay you below a certain wage. Okay, so we have a minimum wage. It's low, but it exists. In certain countries, they don't have a minimum wage, which basically means that whoever you work for is able to pay you as much money as they want, as much or as little money as they want, which can cause poverty, which can cause all other problems as well. Okay, let's move on to social problems. So with social problems, one problem here is overpopulation. Now, how about we check what the current population of the world is? Okay, here's the meter. Oh, it's almost 8 billion people, right? 8 billion people. And it really, the number has grown. If you take a look at the Google graph here, it really has grown a lot. Okay. Moving on. Fast fashion. So why is fast fashion a social problem? It's a social problem, but also an environmental problem, because and also a financial problem as well. So, okay, so this means that clothes are no longer of quality, right? Clothes are made fast and they're made cheap using cheap labor force, right? So basically, if you buy a pair of pants, you can be lucky if they'll last you a few months, and then you'll just buy new ones. This wasn't the case in the past. In the past, clothes were made from very high quality materials, they were expensive, and when you bought them, you wore them for a long time. And nowadays, that's no longer the case. So you buy a pair of pants, you wear them for a few months, then you throw them away, which is a huge environmental problem. Fast fashion is in fact one of the biggest environmental polluters in the world. Okay. And it's also a social problem because we constantly buy those things because buying anything that's of actual quality then gets really, really expensive and we don't have the money for that. So it's a financial problem as well. Right. So fast fashion is a very fascinating topic. Then we have discrimination. What types of discrimination do we know? Plenty. People like to discriminate for different reasons. So we have religious discrimination, we have racial discrimination, causing, of course, racism. We have gender discrimination. Here I put feminism in brackets because this is the word most commonly associated with when it comes to fighting gender inequality. Although we have different waves of feminism, um, I think we're in the third wave now. Okay, next we have famine, so lakota, right? Crime. Here we could go on, but I just have a few here. So murder, rape, drug abuse. In America, they have a huge opioid crisis, meaning that a lot of people are addicted to opioids. A lot of the opioids are actually prescription drugs, meaning that you have a doctor that prescribes you medicine and then you get addicted to that medicine. So it's a vicious cycle, and a lot of people die because they're addicted to opioids. And lastly, here I put child labor, which may not be a crime all around the world, but it's definitely a crime in Slovenia. So you cannot work if you're under 16, usually. And then the last one here we have bullying, which is usually considered more of a young a problem that appears among the young, but it can also happen, for example, at the workplace. Okay. Next, and also lastly, we have political problems. Let's take a look at them. Okay, so here we have war. War is definitely a political problem, and there are still quite a few ongoing wars going on. However, war has changed a lot from, you know, compared to, I don't know, 100 years ago. World War One was very different to how warfare goes on now. And then we have corruption. Corruption and politics are unfortunately intertwined. They're connected. A lot of people who go into politics end up corrupted, and they don't end up fighting for whoever um, they fought for before. So, for example, for the people, but they just end up doing things in order to get money. Okay, incompetent world leaders, of course. Here we have, for example, unfortunately, the name that pops up, for example, Donald Trump and the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Uh, and then at this point, I wanted to mention cults of personality because both Donald Trump and Boris Johnson have cults of personality. Then we have media bias, and of course, with this associated the word fake news. Now, the word bias is interesting. Uh, Bias basically means prejudice, and prejudice means predsodek, right? So instead of just giving the news, people tend to give their own opinions. And then two more. Here we have poor preparedness for a global pandemic, definitely true, and totalitarian regimes, which also connects to the cult of personality. Okay, so we are left with only one thing here, and that's part of the social issues. So from social issues here, I drew a little line going into health issues, and I divided the health issues into mental health and physical health. So, mental health, what we have here, the common mental illnesses here are depression, anxiety, torej anksioznost, low self-esteem, nizka samozavest, nizka samopodoba, and high expectations. So, the high expectations that other people have towards us can can have a very negative effect on our mental health. And lastly, and this is also what your homework is, it's not a lot, but what I have here under physical health is, I would say, very topical. So, disease outbreaks and contagious diseases. So, with disease outbreaks, I would just like to uh, give you two words, a pandemic and an epidemic. And under contagious diseases, torej nalezljive bolezni, I have a few diseases that have been quite popular in the past. Some of them are still popular. So we have the flu or influenza, measles, cholera, tuberculosis, TBC, leprosy, and smallpox. Your task is, so in the homework link on the classroom, I would like you to find the definitions of these two. So English definition of what is a pandemic, what's an epidemic, and I also want you to write down the Slovene translations of these 6 diseases. And that is it. I hope this was useful. This is our mind map. As I mentioned, you get the mind map. You get the link to the mind map on the classroom as well. That's it for me today. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.